Welcome back, everyone. Apologies for the enormous delay. The beginning of this year was kind of a disaster, literally and figuratively. We had some pretty heavy rain, record-breaking rain, that also caused quite a bit of flooding north and south of me. And so for a while I was panicking, trying to get stuff moved out of the basement to higher, drier ground if anything should happen. Thankfully, I did not get hit, but some areas near me were not quite so lucky. Still a lot of cleanup going on from that. And then after that debacle, my friends immediately managed to get a brand new home, and I had to assist them with moving their collections. My buddy is a pretty big TV collector, so we had probably 3 or 4 months worth of work just moving collection stuff. So that was a lot of fun. And once the weather started getting better, I've been trying to dump all my energy into this. I haven't really been doing a lot of TV and radio work simply because there's some legal stuff I need to take care of with this car that cannot be done unless it can be driven. So, to that end, it can be driven, believe it or not. Last I left off, I had the exhaust and intake manifolds off of it. The front end of the car wasn't on, the fenders were off. Everything on here is just sort of tacked on for the sake of looks, except for the engine components. They're in place more or less. But I'll take you a look around the car here, show you what's been done, and then I think we'll go for a drive. I have managed, since the 4th of July is behind us, the first 2 times I recorded this, I was hoping to get to the 4th of July deal, but I never, the first 2 takes kind of sucked, to be honest. Anyway, the car made it to the 4th of July event here in town. I was super happy to be able to show the car off. Got a lot of folks looking at it, never seen or heard of this car brand before, which can't blame them, neither did I. But just a lot of fun, and was able to get it out to as many shows as I can, hopefully this year, because in September there's going to be an official Franklin Club meeting of some Pacific Northwest members that I'm really looking forward to being able to do. Going to have a little mini tour and just kind of hang out. So it'll be nice to meet some other Franklin owners. But let me bring the camera around here and I'll show you what I've been doing to the car in the meantime. Okay, just to get the elephant out of the room here, yeah, I reattached the fenders. The rears and the fronts have been put back on, along with the splash apron and some other miscellaneous pieces of sheet metal like the side rails and the headlight mounts. The headlight mounts are actually necessary to reattach because the hood front uses them as its mounts. There's a pair of ball and socket joints on either side with a large spring-loaded assembly on there. There's a nut that holds that in place, and that's how you get this on. It's just held in 2 points, and then you have the threaded rod along the top that you use to set the gap and make sure that the angle of the front is correct in relation to the hood sides. All this I put on here because while driving it, I really didn't want rocks getting thrown in my face or elsewhere, because these Firestone tires I got from a Coker, the ribs on these suckers are really good at picking up small rocks and flinging them. So took care of that. Let's see, I did reattach the front headlights just because the car looks kind of bare without them, although I do have the one fog light on there right now to act as a driving light that is wired up. I actually just got some original brackets so that I can put 2 of them on here now, because what I didn't realize is the bracket these are S&M Lamp Company fog lights out of Los Angeles. They're made through the teens, 20s, and 30s, and I like the way they look. So I got I have a number of different buckets, a number of different lenses to work with, but only one of the original brackets. And as it turns out, S&M made their own, and the ball and socket joint on the bottom is a unique size. There are reproductions made of brackets like this, but they're intended for use with General Motors branded guide lamps. And I bought a pair of those thinking they'd fit here, but no, they're like 1.5 times the size. So I managed to score another pair off of eBay. Did not want to have to spend more money to get just the brackets, but I guess I got some extra lights with it. So I'll be able to put dual lights up there eventually for legal reasons. But mostly just to have these on here and to get them off the shelf. Space is at a premium after all. Okay, engine-wise, the intake and exhaust manifolds are all installed. And there's Oh, that was probably from me setting the valves. Yeah, intake and exhaust is all in there, including a new muffler and tailpipe setup, which I got from Waldron's. We'll talk about that later. Not super happy with it. But the intake and everything turned out good. Pretty happy with that. The exhaust turned out really good. I even got some appropriate crown head bolts from Restoration Supply Company to put everything back together with. And the gaskets that I got were from another Franklin Club member who makes original copper sandwich style. The originals, I think, had an asbestos center material with the copper wrapped around it. I'm not sure what he uses for the cords, probably something like fiberglass or something along those lines, a high temperature resistant material. But they're really nice, and he says they're reusable so long as you put key graphite paste on them, and all of the gaskets in the exhaust system were assembled with key graphite paste, just like the cylinder heads. And none of that leaks, so super happy with that, but I might end up having to take that off later on. Intake, that went pretty well, although I did not tighten up the bolts on the first two cylinders here very well, and I actually fought a misfire for a while, and it turned out there are 3 bolts that hold it on, one on either side, and then one back here that grabs and holds the edges of these two 90-degree flanges. And that one hadn't been tightened down all the way, and it was sucking air and causing 1 and 2 to run super lean compared to the other, so I was getting popping in the exhaust, and it wasn't producing a ton of power. So I was able to tighten that up, got rid of that issue, so that was good. Engine runs very well, very, very happy with that. Let's see. As far as the exhaust goes, I did take some footage of me doing installation of that, which did not go quite as easily as I thought. My original intention was to try and put key graphite paste on each of the gaskets for the cylinder heads, and I would hang this assembly off of the heads using 1 bolt at either end. And then I would put the gaskets up, sort of slide them in between each flange, poke the bolts through, and then I wouldn't have to, honestly, I don't know what the hell I was thinking with that decision. It wound up being a mess because I did not wait for the solvent in the graphite paste to evaporate. So it was a slurry when I put it onto the gaskets. Had I waited for that to dry out, they would have been tacky, and I probably could have just stuck them directly to the cylinder heads and then just slapped the manifold on and bolted it immediately. And instead I tried my idea of putting them up individually, and of course the key graphite paste wanted to kind of slide off, and it just kind of got all over the place. There's key graphite paste on parts of the manifold that you can't see that has permanently burned on there and is never coming off. But I don't care because it looks pretty good and it seals up nicely, so can't complain too much, but I made it much harder than it needed to be. Now I didn't do any of the final tightening because the 3 sections of this manifold, the main part here, the crossover pipe, and then the gasoline heater that attaches in between the carburetor and intake manifold, all those need to be left loose so that you sort of tighten it up against the cylinder heads first, make sure those are all flush. Then we get this sort of loosely attached and then snuggle the connections up, because there's a lot of individual moving pieces. Because each individual is separate from each other, the distances are all a little different. And I based this, initially when I had the manifold installed, I used a straight edge on the edges of the flanges, and I actually loosened the cylinder hold down nuts and scooted everything up against the flange, made sure that was tight, and then reseated the nuts holding the cylinders down. And that made sure all those are flush with each other to prevent leaks. And then since all of these are individual, the Franklin has a whole procedure on how you tighten those up to get it just right. It's a little more difficult than on a typical single-piece cast block engine, but it works. And yeah, that went pretty well. The high-temperature VHT silver paint that I'm using on the manifolds is holding up great. This engine gets really friggin' hot, at least the exhaust does, and this paint has not burned or flaked off anywhere on it, even on the actual exhaust. The downpipe here, and that is the original downpipe. I sprayed it with the same stuff, holding up fantastic. I did buy a brand new exhaust system from Waldron's, which included the downpipe, a new muffler, and a new tailpipe. The problem is their website did not stipulate that the exhaust assembly would come in sections that had to be welded and cut to fit, which, okay, my complaint is that the website shows a photo of a complete system already formed as a single piece. No splices, no welds, nothing. So when I ordered it, that was the expectation. And what I got was a downpipe that had a split right about there with a flared section. The lower half would then hook into that and go over to the muffler. So I would have to fit that and weld it. It's like, okay, I can do that, no big deal. I ended up welding the tailpipe together and reusing it. But the dimensions weren't quite right. The flange that they had here was substantially larger than the edge here, so it stuck out on either side a comic distance, and I just hated the way it looked. So I just set that whole thing aside. The other problem was the lower half interfered with the parking brake mechanism down here. So this is unique to 4-speed transmission-equipped Franklin Series 14s. The 3-speed has the parking brake assembly in the center mounted directly to the side of the transmission, so that's not on the way. I'm going to guess that when Waldron's made this replica, they probably had a car that had most of its exhaust system on it, and it was probably a 3-speed, so they didn't have to worry about interfering with that. But it didn't fit quite right there, and it interfered with the stock front mounting bracket for the muffler. It didn't line up quite right. So I didn't want to screw with that. This downpipe did have some holes in the bottom of it. I wound up patching those with my welder, good enough for functionality's sake. Maybe someday I can buy one of the club reproduced ones, a bit expensive though, but well worth the cost for a good reproduction. I did, however, reuse the downpipe, the tailpipe sections. And the original tailpipe is over there full of holes, but it's got a very unique shape because it has a bit of a dog to the left, and then it goes over the rear axle, and then it actually attaches to a bracket on the frame just behind the gas tank. Problem is, the Waldron's replacement, and I'll see if I can show you down here. So it does come in. It goes up enough to clear the axle, which is fine. However, if I could get the camera up there, which I kind of can't. Anyway, this is really close to the gas line, but there is a bracket spot on the frame rail back there, and it just doesn't go up far enough to reach it. So the only places that the tailpipe is attached to the car in that case are the rear bracket here, which hangs off and also supports the rear of the muffler, and a bracket hanging off one of the bumper mounts at the back that just holds up the end of the tailpipe. So the top can just kind of flop around. If it gets loose, it could start to swing around and potentially interfere with the rear axle. The muffler, however, fantastic. Honestly, if I thought about it, I would have just, or if I'd known what I was getting, I would have just ordered the muffler and been done with it. But it sounds really good with that installed. So all in all, the muffler fits, tailpipe fits close enough. It's not perfect. It's canted to one side. Personally, if I were to do it again, since I'm keeping the original tailpipe, I'd rather just have a muffler shop make a direct copy of that. And I do have the drawings for it. So maybe someday in the future I'll have a better one made. Anyway, exhaust works. And then of course the other big thing is the intake assembly. I finally got the factory Stromberg U3 carburetor professionally rebuilt. We've got one of the guys in the club that his specialty is car body wood, redoing the fans on the front, and rebuilding Franklin carburetors. Mine was actually missing a number of important parts. The whole choke butterfly was just completely gone, and some parts of the accelerator pump and economizer were missing. So I just sent it off to him. He completely went through it inside and out, set up the float size and everything, jets and all that good stuff, and then gave it a wonderful coat of black epoxy paint. So that's been running the engine super nicely. These only have one adjustment it's got two adjustments. There's an idle stop screw on the other side of the carburetor flange, but there's this one brass screw right here that alters the amount of air that bypasses the throttle butterfly when it's all the way closed and the idle circuit is sucking fuel. So cranking that out will spin the speed up, provide a little more air around the butterfly and that sort of thing. That's set up, I think I've got it running at about 500. They said anywhere between 500 to 600 RPM is pretty typical. Stromberg, I think, says screw it out until it runs as fast as it can and no more, something like that. But they say like half turn max. It's pretty simple. And I also have the manual controls for the throttle and the choke installed. Now the choke cables and such I'm using are just generic stuff from Napa. I don't have the originals. I really need to get them because the original knobs and the dash for the choke and the spark retard actually hold the original ignition coil and lock assembly in place. And the replacements from Napa, the threaded section where it mounts the dash, is too short to allow that. So they're just on there for functionality's sake, and I'm still using my VW Bosch Blue Coil to run the engine, which is doing a fantastic job. No problems there. Anyway, I've got that. The control for the foot pedal is back here along with the ridiculously long throttle return spring. Yes, this is how the factory had it set up. It fixes over here to the firewall. And we also have, and I'm glad I got this from another club member, the original steering wheel control for the throttle. So the steering wheel has two levers on it, one of which is for the dimmer switch, which is hanging down here off the end of the steering box. And just in front of it, it's kind of hard to see, there's a clamp assembly with an arm and a ball joint that runs this curved doohickey right here, and this pushes up on a sliding piece, and that allows us to manually increase the throttle. And on the steering wheel, and I apologize for the darkness in here, this lower one, this is at idle, and then as we move it out, that cranks it up, and it should look a little something like that. This is predominantly used for getting the car started, although you could use it as a cruise control. People on tours do use it for that. And then I do also have the dimmer switch hooked up, and right now all it's doing is acting as a light switch for the tail light and the fog light. Because unfortunately my original light switch that goes in the dash, the lever is slightly damaged and doesn't engage with the switch mechanism, so I got to figure out how to fix that before I can put it back in and use it again. Also, the lever here is not in quite the right position. This should be directly opposite the throttle. That's because when I attached it to the shaft, there's 3 positions it could possibly go in, and I chose poorly. So that's an easy fix, although I did have to replace the entire tube assembly. The throttle tube was slightly bent, so I was able to unbend that and get it working again. But the inner tube for the dimmer switch had been chopped off and mangled at the end. So I wound up buying some steel tubing from McMaster Carr. I milled a slot in the end for the dimmer switch, and then I welded the little it's a steel plate with 3 little fingers sticking out of it. And then this assembly fits over it, and there's a retaining ring that snaps in the bottom to hold it together. So I got that attached, and that all works really nicely. And now you might be wondering, well, what happens if you spin the steering wheel with all that junk in there? Won't it move along with the steering wheel? Well, it would, except that on the end of the throttle tube, all the way down here, just in front of the dimmer switch, and you probably can't even see it, there's a little bit of a brass band showing. That is a friction clamp, and the end of the throttle shaft has knurling on it. And that little booger, you tighten it down just enough so that when you spin the steering wheel around, it doesn't take the throttle for a ride with it. There's nothing more fun than making a hard right turn, or sorry, a hard left turn, and opening the engine full throttle while you're in first gear and just taking off. That got me once or twice when I found I hadn't quite clamped it down good enough. So that's all working. I also managed to get an original AC air filter from another club member. I wish I had a decal for it, but I cannot find an image of an early AC in an oval. They're all different designs, of the wrong color, and the factory drawings show a very simplified design that, I don't know. It's fine for now with that one. I am, however, running rubber lines between the fuel pump, carburetor, and tank for the moment. I do have the original copper lines here, but I needed to test the fuel pressure, so hooking a T and a gauge and everything was much easier with just some generic rubber line. The fuel pump has been gone through. I flattened the surfaces before the diaphragm went back in to make sure there would be no leaks, and I machined a brand new push rod because the one that was in it was just a piece of random steel cut with a hacksaw that was too short, and I wasn't getting enough pressure. These carburetors need at least 2 to 3 psi from the pump to run correctly without, well, just to get enough fuel to the engine. And I was only getting about 1. So I made my my push rod I made to factory standard, I think for the 33 engine. There's different specs for different blocks. So I based it off of that, and then made a gasket thin enough to take up any space. When these pumps start to get older, the mechanical linkage wears out, and so you either have to shrink the thickness of the gasket to compensate, or you make the push rod longer. Usually making the push rod longer is the better option of the two, but the ends need to be hardened, so I flame hardened and oil quenched those to get a decent amount of resilience to the beating it's taking. But it does work. I'm getting at least 2 psi. The engine seems to be doing just fine on hills. I haven't taken it up anything extremely steep, but it hasn't choked on me. It hasn't died at all. In fact, the engine, I could probably leave it running until it runs out of gas. It seems perfectly content to just keep chugging along, which is great, except that it's burning oil because the rings haven't seated, so it's going to take a few hundred miles before that settles in. So let's take a look at the opposite side and see what I've got going on. Okay, you'll have to excuse the slight mess here. I'm just kind of sloppy with cleaning up the engine area. Anyway, generator, well, last we looked, I had it taken out, cleaned up, painted, bearings checked, replaced the original wiring coming out for the connection to the cutoff relay here. Cutoff relay works just fine. Whole system charges just fine. I have the third brush set to absolute minimum because I've only got like 1 or 2 lights on it. And in fact, when I'm driving, I do keep the lights on to keep the charge rate at a decent spot where it doesn't boil the crap out of the poor battery, because those Optima red tops do not have any way for the hydrogen gas to escape. And I've heard what one of those sounds like when you charge it too hard. It's very angry. So I'm keeping an eye on that. The ammeter on the dash is hooked up, so I have an idea when it is charging. And these do not charge at idle. So if you have an older car like this that doesn't have regular, it's just a third brush with a cutout, once you get the engine above idle, then it'll start charging, and then eventually it maxes out some whatever value the third brush is set for. But at idle, you will be draining the battery slightly more if you have lights on. There's really not much you can do about that. You don't really want to bump the third brush up more to try and get it to charge off idle, because then it'll really cook a battery, lead acid, vented or otherwise. Distributor, all that. This is a unit that I got off of eBay that is correct for a 1930 engine. I kept the one from the 33 block as a backup and cleaned it up too. But I also got this distributor mount casting here off of eBay with it that is correct for 1930, and I cleaned that up. Only thing I had to do, though, the distributor is driven off the oil pump gear, and the oil pump gear in turn is driven off the camshaft. The oil pump gear sits vertically inside the case, and in order to keep it from destroying the aluminum block, there is a bronze thrust washer above and below it. The top one on both this casting and the one that actually came with this engine, they was just missing. That bronze thrust washer was actually retained by a countersunk screw, and on both castings that screw had sheared off at some point, and the thrust washer, or the gear itself, had started to slowly eat into the aluminum on the top of this casting. The 33 blocks was in much worse shape. This one was still pretty flat on top, so I drilled out the screw remnants, retapped it, machined a new thrust washer to Franklin spec, and then reinstalled all that, and that works pretty good. One thing I did not do that I'm kicking myself over is I did not shim the body of the distributor to fit snugly in this casting. So I've got this return spring ensuring that the distributor remains in the fully advanced position when the engine's running, because normally it wants to try and drag it to full retard. I'm assuming that originally the friction between the distributor itself and the casting was all that was keeping it in place, and that the knob on the dash was just there for moral support, because the knob on the dash, there's absolutely no friction there. It doesn't care. It provides nothing. I'm going to come up with a slightly better solution than this stupid piece of baling wire and this enormous spring. I want to make a bracket that comes off these two bolts that sticks up that is directly in line with the clamp here, which I machined. So something that looks period appropriate, because the Franklin technical manuals do show a lot of period fixes that are along those lines of make something in the shop out of scrap steel and paint it. So I figured that'd be appropriate. New oil filter installed. Second one, technically. The first one had a failure, and I had to get a replacement. Robert Motor Parts guys, good though. They sent me a new one free of charge, even though I was well outside the warranty period. So love them for that. Custom lines to and from. The one going to it is actually per Franklin print, more or less, using original fittings. The one coming out of it is basically what Franklin was doing past 1931, I believe. The Purolator filter they went to moved the outlet from the front end to the back like this. So they had to add a fitting to that end, and then they brought it up and dumped it over the timing chain inspection hole, which does provide additional lubrication for the timing chain, and I'm told it improves the lifespan quite a bit, so this is the preferred setup. So I've got that rigged up. That all seems to be working. The originals had an 8,000 mile lifespan according to Purolator. I have no idea how long these are supposed to last. I should probably ask the guys that sold it to me just in case. Starter motor obviously cleaned up, although I did buy some insulating rubber boots for the terminals just to save my own butt. I did put one on the starter switch button. I noticed that I think Franklin originally had one on there, according to the parts list. There's not a lot of room between the negative terminal and chassis ground on the transmission bell housing there, so I don't need it flexing when I press on it with my foot and shorting out both terminals. Okay, outside of that, nothing really else going on over here. It is leaking oil. Now I'm told that's kind of just a fact of life with these engines. However, oil is actually being pushed up from all of the cam follower cover gaskets, and I believe that's because the ring's nut sealing is putting additional pressure inside the crankcase, and it's forcing the oil out of every possible spot. Very little is actually coming out of the valve cages, and I am keeping them oiled. I did also temporarily reinstall the spark plug tubing up here. I do have the gooseneck that comes down to go to the top of the distributor. However, the one I have is full of dents, and there's no way in hell all of these wires are going to shove into that easily with the dents in place. And plus, I want to get them re-chromed. So if I can get those dents taken out, I think I'm going to try taking it to an instrument repair place that has experience with, say, wind instruments, copper and brass. They should have the tools necessary to take dents out of thin sheet metal of any kind. So if I can get that done, I can try and find a chrome place that can do that for me, hopefully. And that's about it for the engine. It's running good. I've only had it up to about 35, maybe 40 miles per hour, which is what the factory says is probably the max for an engine that hasn't been fully broken in. They say for about the first 100 miles or so, you shouldn't exceed 35. So, trying to be careful with it, but it runs good. Now, running good is great. However, stopping is more important. And where I spent a decent chunk of time on this vehicle was just getting the brake system to behave. So there's not much you can see from up here. Obviously, we've got my nice reservoir that, this is a new one from the club, although I did reuse the original cap, just because I had the rest of the tank was shot. I did make a brand new decal using an image that was posted on the AACA forum. Super happy with that. And of course, all new copper lines throughout. And I also put some of the creosote wiring loom over this. Franklin does spec this for most of the external connections to the wheel cylinders. So the lines that go under here from the front tires down along the frame and on the inside, anywhere it's exposed to the outside is got that asphalt loom around it. I had some extra left over, so I tried to protect as much of that line as I possibly could. Now, one part of the original brake system that I did reuse, on the fittings anyway, was this guy. So these early flare fittings have a rounded, tapered profile to them. The modern ones just have a straight taper. You can't get these anymore. You could modify the new ones to look like that, but this is the only one that's actually visible from the outside, so it's the only one I bothered with. Also, you do not want to use the original fittings a second time off of one of these cars with the copper brake system, because they work hard and they split, and I found several original nuts like that had just cracked right down the middle and were completely useless. Good way to lose all your brakes. So all the flare nuts on this guy are brand new. I got them from the club, although you can probably purchase them from McMaster Car. However, there are two standard lengths you encounter with flare nuts. There's a short one that seems to be super common. These are about twice as long as that. They're about an inch or so long, and they prevent the line from flexing as close to the flare point as possible, much less likely to break them. Those are preferred. But I hand bent, flared everything, and annealed all the ends. Now, I will say, originally, I filled the system with DOT5 silicone brake fluid. I could not get the system to stay sealed with it. It did technically work, but none of the copper washer fittings on the banjo bolts for the wheel cylinders would stay leak-free. It just, no matter what I did, annealing, sanding, making sure everything was flat and flush, did not matter. The DOT5 was going to find a way out of the system. Now, I'm glad that it found all the leaks it did because it didn't damage the paint any, but when I discovered that my master cylinder had a leak at the front end after I'd cleaned it up and honed it, I opted to have it sent out and completely rebuilt. It was sleeved with a non-ferrous sleeve. I don't know if they did brass or stainless steel, but it was fully rebuilt by Apple Hydraulics in New York. They did a fabulous job. It is 100% leak-free. In fact, the entire system is leak-free now because I purged all the DOT5 out of it and switched back to normal glycol-based DOT4. And it's not leaked a drop since I did that over a month ago. So super happy with that result. I did wind up replacing all four wheel cylinders with brand new ones. The originals were completely hammered, completely shot on the inside. You can get rebuild kits for them. The originals are Wagner FC 695s. However, Ray Bestis sells them, and you can get them on Amazon for like $65 each. Sells new wheel cylinders under the, I think they're WC 695. Or no, sorry, WC 695 was the original number? Whatever. Doesn't matter. They are relatively inexpensive. It was actually cheaper than having them rebuilt, and they were plug and play. Although I did have to make a number of copper washers myself because some of the sizes are not readily available for most places. In fact, copper washers, I can't even go into most auto parts stores and buy SAE sizes. I had to order them all online. But system's been bled. System works great. Since the brake shoes were already relined, all I had to do is adjust them, and it stops fantastic. I suppose we can take a look inside real quick. We get the parking brake out of the way here, and I can try and shed a little bit of light on the inside. Steering column is mounted up. Now technically the steering column bolts in two places. One of them is the firewall, and the other is the bottom of the dash here. However, since the dash itself isn't rigidly attached to the car currently, there's a little bit of wobble on the steering column. Not a lot, but there is a little. However, since the steering box was fully rebuilt, this thing steers miles better than it did when I first drove it. There is basically no slop in it left. It's all been removed. New worm, new roller, new bearings, new seals. It's all really well done, again by a Franklin Club member. And I painted up everything real nice. Wish I just used like Rust-Oleum or something. I actually used a single stage urethane paint on this, and it's gonna get dinged up and not be quite worth the expense of that, but oh well. I did also install most of the dash. There, let me get behind the wheel. It's a bit of a tight squeeze, and especially with the parking brake on this side, when this thing is actually pulled out, it is right in way your knees. The 3-speed guys have it much easier. Anyway, so I do have the instrument panel partially reassembled. I did clean everything. I polished it. I made new gaskets out of Buna N cord rubber to go around where the glass fits up. And then the paint on the original panels was good enough. I decided to leave it alone. It was all done by hand anyway. And I've only got some of the gauges in here because only some of them actually work. The speedometer and odometer over there on the left, I completely stripped that down, cleaned it and reassembled it, and I also tore apart and cleaned the speedometer cable and lubricated the core with graphite, and that works quite well. And as you can see, we've got about 45-ish miles on there as of right now. So pretty happy with that. Ammeter is rigged up and does work. It's more of a yes or no than a super accurate indication. It's either you're charging or you're not charging, so that's handy. Now I do have the oil pressure gauge in there, but I don't have it hooked up because the original line that I have is not in good shape, and I need to salvage the fittings off of it because there's solder on before I can run a new line to the engine. However, I know it has plenty of oil pressure because the oil is being forced out of every single place it possibly can. So that's about it for that. I did repaint the center here. This would have been a similar walnut pattern to the left and right side, but it was completely shot. Rust was all over the damn thing, so that was not useful in the slightest. And for right now, I just have the choke control and then the timing retard. I actually managed to start the engine by accident when I was leaving a show just by flipping the ignition on, fully retarding this, and one piston was in just the right spot that it kicked off, which was really cool. I'd never done that before. I don't have the tow board in yet because, unfortunately, the accelerator pedal gets right in the way of reinstallation. So I have to take the pin out of that and move it up out of the way before I can get that board in. And before that, I still need to make an inspection plate cover for the transmission bell housing there because that one is just long gone. I also rebuilt the battery box, which you can't see sadly because the seat's sitting on top of it, but cut out all the rusted metal, got that all fixed up. Have not done anything else to the interior though. The seats are just kind of sitting in here. I do have a bolt holding the seat frame here down because if you put this car in reverse and then stop real fast, the whole assembly rocks you forward into the windshield. But that's about all I've got for the car. I think we should take it out for a spin and see how she does. Okay, well, it's about time to wrap this up. I am going to apologize for some of the shifts in that section of driving footage. I have never driven a crash box transmission before, and even though I have adjusted the clutch pedal and everything on this pretty close to where the factory says it should be, downshifting is, even with double clutching, still something I'm getting used to. I haven't quite gotten it. I'm used to synchro mesh transmissions, so throttling it up and everything to shift in those is pretty straightforward. With this, you really got to get it right on the money. The manual says you either do it really fast and just ram the gears together, or you take it slow and double clutch it, but I haven't quite got the hang of matching RPM on this just yet. It seems this car likes to shift back from third to second gear somewhere around 15 miles per hour with the engine at idle. So doing it at closer to 20 miles per hour means I got to throttle up a little bit more. And you just got to be gentle. You can't really slam it into the gears. You got to kind of gently pull on it, and you'll feel it just kind of thunk, snap into place. But while first does have the typical straight cut gear whine, second and third are silent. The only thing you can hear in the car is, well, all the loose panels squeaking and the rumbling of the engine, which is really, really nice. I love the way this car sounds. Now you might have seen when I got up to at least 30-35 miles per hour in some places, the front end of the car started to wobble a little. I've got all the steering linkage on the front of the car gone through, greased and tightened up, but I haven't had the wheels on this car balanced. It's going to be a little tricky finding a shop. I believe there's a place nearby that does classic work that I can see if they have a good old-fashioned static balancer to take my wood spoke wheels, and they should be able to clip weights onto the back side of the rims since that stays put. And I'm hoping that getting those two front wheels balanced at the bare minimum will take the shake out of the front end, because I'm going to need to be able to drive the car at 40 at the very least to take care of my title stuff. But on the whole, driving this is a blast. I'm going to try and get it out as much as I can. But before I do any more driving, I need to take care of the front wheel wobble situation. I need to get turn signals on it, although using hand signals is perfectly legal. Unfortunately, most people on the road are stupid, me included. And half of them have no clue what you're doing, you're holding your hands out the window, and they'd probably just assume I'm trying to flip them off or something. So I've got some generic turn signals that I can stick on the holes for the fender lights up front, and I've got some brackets I can use to mount them on the bumper on the rear of the car. And I just ordered a turn signal switch to fit on the steering column that I think should look really good, assuming it isn't out of stock, because I could not find them anywhere else. So I'm super excited for that. Of course, we'll run some temporary wiring to hook that all up. The other thing that I need to take care of is, when I started with the engine, the fan was rubbing against the Venturi ring that covers the front of it. And I'm hearing some sort of a rumble from that area again. I don't think the fan itself is making contact with the cover plate for the timing chain and area, but it might be just slightly making contact with the front of the fan shroud again. So I need to take the hood front off. I need to unbolt the front and look to see if it's rubbing, because if it is, about the only thing I could do is make some sort of a paper gasket to offset the front like a few thousandths of an inch to take up any space and prevent it from doing that. Because while I can't hear it where I'm driving, when the engine's idling and I'm standing in front of it, it is a little disconcerting. I did also tighten up the valves. On this engine, on the 1930 cars, they said to set them cold. On 31 and later cars, they say to do them while it's hot and running. So I did this car while it was hot, which was interesting. You got to get the engine as slow as humanly possible, which the easiest way to do that is to get it at idle and then retard the timing all the way so it slows down to like 250, 300 RPM, and then do one at a time, and I set them to about 7 thousandths. But it significantly quieted up the valve train so that when it fires up and runs, it gets warmed up and everything, it's clatter-free. So it's not as silent as some of the water-cooled cars of the area, especially not a Packard. I don't think anything's as quiet as a Packard 6 or Packard 8 or whatever. But it's a lot quieter than you would expect from an air-cooled, basically an airplane engine. But that's about going to do it. I think I'm running out of camera battery here. And I will see you guys real soon, hopefully with some radio-related content. If not, I will be keeping progress on the car as I get more and more work done to it. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.